What's up, guys? Welcome to Simple Chinese. My name is Mike Lin. In this episode of video, I'm going to talk about a very interesting topic, which is the difference between simplified Chinese and the traditional Chinese. Okay, so whenever you want to translate and say English to Chinese, usually there are two options. It's either simplified Chinese or traditional Chinese. So they both are Chinese. Okay, the only difference is the way how you write them. Okay, so simplified basically means it's a lot easier. Obviously, it's called simplified version of writing a word. And the traditional Chinese means it's the old way of writing Chinese, at least before simplified happened. So that's the difference. And the simplified is definitely easier compared to traditional. Okay, so today I'm just gonna give you based on what I know, the history, the region, and then the argument about simplified and traditional Chinese. Okay. So what's the history? So basically, what happened was there's a civil war in China, and then like whatever happened, and the communist China took over, and then it was like 1949 or 1950 basically. 1949 is when the new communist China was formed, and then after that time, the communist China decided, hey, when we write in Chinese, it's sometimes some words are a lot more, very, very complicated to write, and just too hard to learn, which is very time consuming. So that's why after the communist China was formed, the government decided to maybe simplify some of the words. So that's when the simplified Chinese was formed. Okay, it's 1949, and obviously before that, all Chinese were traditional Chinese. We just spend much more time writing them, right? So that's the history of it, and simplified the Chinese. Now let's talk about region. Simplified Chinese is using in the mainland China. That's what the simplified Chinese is used most of the time, all the time pretty much. And then the traditional Chinese, okay, will be used in places like Taiwan. I spelled that wrong. Taiwan, yeah, Taiwan. Maybe there's a G there. Taiwan, and Hong Kong. Okay. Okay. So let's also talk about the traditional Chinese history in the region. So even though the China finally became the communist China in 1949. Then what happened was during the Civil War, there's also democratic China, and then obviously they lost. So all those democratic China went to Taiwan. Okay, that's where all those people, some of the people who lost, they went there. So Taiwan is basically, if you look at China, obviously I don't want to draw that. It's kind of like a rooster kind of thing, kind of like that. Kind of thing, right? China. I don't even know, but assuming that's China, and then Taiwan will be right there. Okay, there's an island right there. So all this entire China region is, after communist government take over, started to using simplified Chinese, and then the democratic China, they moved to this island called Taiwan, right? So in Taiwan, they have their own government right now. Taiwan is independent on their own, and then Taiwan is still using traditional Chinese. Okay, so traditional Chinese will be using Taiwan, and then Hong Kong. Okay, Hong Kong is basically this small region down here. It was controlled by British government until 1997. So obviously there's no involvement of Chinese government, until after 1997. Right, so obviously, so the simplified Chinese was changed after 1949. So by the time 1997, obviously it's already completely developed. But obviously between those times, Hong Kong wasn't part of China, so that's why they're still using traditional Chinese nowadays. So just remember, simplified Chinese was formed after 1949, after Chinese government, the communist government take over China, and then that's why they decided to simplify some of the Chinese words, so it's a lot easier to memorize in the rights or all those things, right? And then it's mainly used in mainland China. That's what you know, we think about Mandarin Chinese, China Chinese. You know, that's what simplified Chinese is. And traditional Chinese will be you know, Taiwan, Hong Kong, but when you read them, the only difference between simplified and the traditional is how you write them. That's the only difference. Okay, let me write this down here. The only difference. Difference, right, is how you write. How you write them. That's the only difference. W-R-I-T, yeah. How you write them. But other than that, you still pronounce the same. You know, you still communicate still in the same way. So you know, it's not really that big of a deal. But it might be kind of difficult for you if you try to read them, because some words you don't really recognize because you know it's complicated in traditional Chinese. And then here's an argument. So what is an argument? Let me get an eraser here. So the argument will be, should Chinese, you know, go back on using traditional Chinese, because they did simplify they simplify the Chinese. You know, that's why Chinese become much easier. But some people argue, you know, should simplified Chinese lost the meaning of the original Chinese word. So one of the great example I can think about even today, you know, it's been long ago when I think about things like this. But this word here, okay, this word means I means love, right? So love, this is simplified Chinese, okay. So people argue when you look at this word in Chinese simplified version, you really couldn't tell. Like the word lost its meaning, okay, like it's but it doesn't really kind of represent any meaning. Like you simplify it and like if you look at the word, it's hard to explain the word love, the real, you know, the compassion you have, right? And the traditional Chinese, how you write this word would be this. The traditional version of which is love, sorry, would be this. Okay. So, as you can tell, traditional Chinese is usually, pretty much always, I think it is always, you know, more complicated compared to simplified Chinese, okay? But it has its meaning, okay? If you look at this part here, people argue that in traditional Chinese, there's a heart inside the word love, okay? This word here, the part here, in Chinese means love, okay? You can only love a person if you have a heart, right? You love a person full-heartedly. That's an argument. But with this word here by itself means friendship. Yo means friendship, which is still pretty good, right? But don't you think it's more important maybe, you know, if you're loving a person with your full heart, you know, use your heart, like with the word heart inside the word love, that really represents the Chinese meaning that, you know, I love a person, that's why, you know, with my heart, you know. But with this as a friend, it's like, okay, you're friend, so what, you know, I don't care, right? So that's an argument. Obviously, like, it's not very technical, like, usually people don't really care about things like that. But it's just an interesting thing to think about, like, you know, there's an argument there and why people use this or why people use that, right? So that's the only difference. Like a quick review here, you know, they all like they all read the same, like it's, you know, pronounced the same. The only difference is they're like we read them, we write them, you know, maybe it's, you know, it's more complicated, like these two words, okay? And that's basically the history behind it, how simplified Chinese was formed, their region, traditional Chinese, where their region is, you know, be right here. And then this argument. So that's the only thing, pretty much, you know, if you want to, you know, in the future, if you think about the difference between simplified and traditional, that's pretty much all you have to know. And that's pretty much what I know to this point, and you know, it makes sense, right? So that's it. This is all for this lesson. I just want to clarify very, you know, early stage, so in the future when you get into more lessons, you know, you understand, okay, maybe this, the reason why, you know, maybe it's simplified, traditional, blah blah blah, right? So see you in the next video. Have a good day. Bye bye.